Welcome everybody and welcome to this S&D press conference for this session this week. As in the absence of Gianni Pittella, our group president running for elections in Italy, I have the pleasure to announce our Udo Bullmann in his capacity as first vice president, our acting group president, to take la parole today. Udo.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Uta, for introducing me. The interim is always an occasion to refocus on what is important for your group. This is what we are right now doing. And the major importance you can read from our impulse for the ongoing parliamentary week. What we did is to decide on a topical debate on inequality. This is what we will discuss in the plenary tomorrow. More than 120 million of Europeans are threatened by poverty. That is some 24%. We have even higher numbers when it comes to young people. We see this amazing divergence in the distribution of wealth inequality. And we also see that this is very severely still a gender issue given the pay gap between men and women. Also a territorial issue where you have to say that the productivity and income development gap is growing within the European Union. We, the Socialists and Democrats, regard that to be deeply unjust. This is a basic conflict with our values in the European Union, but it is also harming the productivity of the European Union. It is undermining our economic potential, our economic productivity. It is undermining our capacity to be creative and to solve our problems. And it is damaging social inclusiveness, giving rise to populism and hatred of all sorts. Dear friends, if you can predict a child in a deprived territory from parents who have to face unemployment, perhaps also in the second generation, how can you justify that the children of this area and that the children in a situation like that do have less opportunities that somebody else has in a metropolitan area, being the child in a rich household? This is not defendable, and it's high time that the European Union turns to the basic questions of Europe, and this is one of them. We expect the Commission, also in the current legislature, to adopt appropriate policies. That is policy for growth and employment. That is to develop a system of minimum wages. That is active steps towards a child guarantee that safeguards housing and decent food equipment for each and any child in the European Union. We want to see a decent work agenda to fight a situation where we have working poor growing in many countries. This is our political agenda, and we put that on equal footing with other basic challenges of our days, like, for instance, climate change. And what you can expect from the Socialists and Democrats in the next forthcoming week and months is that we will work on a new strategy. And perhaps here we are pioneering in comparison to other political groups. We will work on a new strategy for sustainable development where economic efforts and economic growth is not any longer played against environmental development and is not played against social inclusiveness. We need a holistic approach, and we very much advocate a policy for the European Union that makes reference to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. That will be our policy for the next forthcoming months, and that will also be our policy when it comes to the uprun of the next campaign. Here it fits very well, and I come directly to other points of this week. Here it fits very well that we are advocating strong EU democracy. You will have seen the proposals of the Pedro Silva Pereira report, where we try to redistribute the seats in the European Parliament to present a strong European Parliament for the next forthcoming period. We are also advocating transnational lists at an improvement of European democracy, giving a say to real European movements and to real European parties. This is our policy. I know Jean-Claude Juncker a couple of minutes ago was very skeptical about the consensus building in the Council. We know that governments may be still reluctant, but we advocate that as a real achievement for our citizens, and we will not stop working for that. Same applies to the system of European Spitzenkandidaten. I think you will have realized in this mandate already that it was an added value for European democracy that our Parliament insisted on the fact that the Commission's president has to be somebody who was running as a Spitzenkandidat for one of our political families, and we will support this for the next time as well. So far from my side, I'm of course here also to go into a more deepened discussion with you, but also to answer questions, whatever is on your mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Udo Buhlmann. Now it's time for questions you might have. Please indicate your medium and name. Yes, please. And then David. Après.
Bonjour, Monsieur El-Mali.
Good morning. I'm a journalist from the Kurdish press. Two debates are scheduled on Turkey this evening, one on the human rights situation, the other the ongoing war which started 19 days ago. What is your group's position regarding the serious situation in Afrin? Thank you.
Well, we are very worried about that. We think that the invasion is a not defendable position, and we hope that the obvious breach of international law by Erdogan is going to be stopped as soon as possible. What we want to see is the strengthening of the peace process. We should try to make all parties avoid anything which is an obstacle to this peace process. Syria and the people of Syria need urgently peace, and all our efforts have to be concentrated on the fight against Daesh and not on the fight against some regional population or specific groups of society like the Kurds.
Thank you. David?
David Carretta, Radio Radicale. Since it's the last session in Strasbourg, at least before the Italian elections, if I may, two questions. The first one on what happened Saturday in Macerata, the shooting of migrants by an extremist from the right. There is a big debate right now in Italy. What are your comments on that shooting? And do you think that the right-wing coalition is in the position to be at the government, since the candidate for the interior minister of Mr. Berlusconi, who is Matteo Salvini, is saying, well, we should get rid of migrants, clean street by street Italy. And the second question is on the Partito Democratico platform. If you read the platform, you will discover that they are against budget balanced. They want to be at 3% of deficit. and so on. Do you think that Italy could afford this type of left-wing, maybe populism? Thank you.
First of all, on the question of the incredible crimes that occurred within Italy, whenever a crime happens, and that was perhaps the first thing to comment on, whether that is committed by the regional population, somebody from the regional population, or whether it is a crime that was caused by somebody who had migrant roots. The police is in charge and have to do its jobs. I don't think that it is helpful if responsible politicians, also like Mr. Berlusconi, are talking about social bombs which are ticking and making reference to refugees and to the refugee population. I personally think, and I'm quite sure, because also of my background in my country, in Germany, that if you talk like that, you invite people to do the wrong things. And we should not do that. To be a responsible politician means to watch your words and to watch your behavior and not send the wrong incentives for explosive developments. So the political class, let me put it like that, should show more responsibility in peacefully balancing situations like that. We know that Italy is a front-runner in taking up the responsibility to give shelter to refugees. And I have to say, I admire Italy for what they are doing. And we have to provide each and any support from the European Union. And we have to argue and to work for a fair distribution of refugees within the European Union. But we should avoid each and any escalation in national discourses, which is due to national campaigns. That is always a wrong decision to try to make issues like that a controversial issue in national campaigns. We can read the methodology, but I don't like it, and I don't regard it to be helpful. On the Partito Democratico, I cannot see that our sister party is evolving towards a position where they argue for non-balanced budgets. I cannot see that they voluntarily argue for excessive deficits. This is not my understanding. What our Italian friends indicate is that, and this is my political position as well, that it needs more than to cut items in your budget to have a sound economic development. And here the very question is up whether our framework of economic and fiscal regulation is really up to these challenges of the time, and whether or not we should give more stress on the growth element in the Stability and Growth Pact. So we are urging on the Commission for quite a while already to be more flexible and to help those countries who would like to invest in the future in modern technologies, in infrastructure, in appropriate housing, in education especially. Expenses in these modernization areas have, of course, to be treated differently than if you invest in the past or do just nothing to react to the challenges of today. This was already, if you would like to give, to read that as a proof of my position, this was the position of the Socialists and Democrats in the days when I was an economic coordinator in the Econ Committee, and when we were discussing the last reform some 8 years ago of the Stability and Growth. Unfortunately, it was only us and nobody else who was affiliated to this idea of flexible sanctions as well as incentives of the modernization process of our economy. I hope that today we have more allies than we had in the past.
Are there other questions? Yes, please.
Yes, Daniel Weber from the Luxembourgish Public Radio. Meine Frage auf Deutsch.
Question in German, if I may. You mentioned transnational lists. I would like to ask you about the Spitzenkandidaten. Criticism has been voiced in several member states about this idea. Will the European Parliament stick to its guns on this, come what may? Thank you for your question. I think we should give careful thought as to what the reasons for this criticism are. As I'm sure you remember, in the old days, the heads of state and government, either after the elections or even before the elections, met in smoke-filled rooms to decide which of their ranks would take on the position of President of the European Commission. That was an enormous disservice to European democracy. And I think we could even go somewhat further by saying that's an absolute violation of the sovereignty of voters in the various different member states if the executive adopts a position on the post-electoral situation before the voters have actually been to the ballot boxes. If the European Union wants to go back to the bad old ways when voters didn't even know why they were voting in European elections, that's the way forward. But I don't believe that's what we should do. If we do want a genuine democracy in the European Union, we have to ensure that voters have the last say. And that means they have to be able to participate in important elections. And surely the identity of the President of the European Commission has to depend on the outcome of an election. And the only way of doing that is for the various different parties to declare who their Spitzenkandidat is. The fact that privileges can be lost, and the fact that people are trying to explain what their role is, a potential risk, but I don't think it's very damaging.
Thibaut Martinez Del Cairo de QH Info.
Tomorrow there'll be a vote for against the impeachment or the removal from office of Richard Czarnecki. What does your group think about the comments he made regarding Ms. Thun? We have...
I was still in my Luxembourg German conversation, forgive me for that. Of course, my group has dealt very seriously with this question. And here we go to the basics. The European Parliament was founded on the rejection of Nazism and of war. And it was founded with the purpose to have a peaceful neighborhood and building up a new democratic house of the European Union. What we cannot afford is Nazi language in this house on the top of our representation, and we cannot accept that the comparison to Nazis are drawn from high representatives of this house towards colleagues. That is not justified. If you don't like a colleague, if you are not agreeing with the political position of a colleague, does not justify each and any declamation that somebody is close to Nazis or a Nazi collaborator. I would have preferred the ECR group deciding on this vice president to step down himself. This is a failure of this group. Now we have to draw the conclusion institutionally, but our group stands ready, because this is not a conflict with a political group, to invite the ECR to present somebody new who does not fail on these issues, and then we will vote for that.
Thank you very much. Have a good week. If there are more questions, we can take them outside. Merci, vielen Dank.